Right, so think back to a time when you could not afford something that you wanted, like a new car, or a house, or even a TV. But as you started trying to build money for it, you noticed that you never made progress towards it, and you might have even started losing money. And situations like that, especially with loans like for a car or student loans, a budget would be very important for that, to keep an eye on it. So yeah, this would be very important for you to learn, as this is something that very few Americans actually do. They very few keep hold on a budget. So this would be very important overall to study. And then I've looked at this kind of topic for several years. I'm very big on numbers and statistics, and have recently been looking at my own budget and doing research on sites from like the US Bureau of Labor Statistics. So the thesis here is developing a budget is beneficial because it allows you to keep track of expenses, make financial goals, and prevent waste of your income. So first we have to see what a budget is and what it's mainly used for. And according to DaveRamsey.com on their article, What is a Budget? It is described as an estimate of income and expenses over a given amount of time in different categories. And then on mymoneycoach.ca, on their article titled What is Budgeting, they say that it is primarily used to ensure that you have enough money for different sources, for your different areas of expense. And they both describe it as balancing your income with your expenses overall. And then after we've seen what it is and what it's used for, we now have to look at what kinds of goals you can have, such as short-term goals like emergency expenses, trying not to impulse buy certain things, and to save up not only money, but learn tips about how to save up money. So they talk about this on Quicken.com and their source, short-term budgeting tips, which talks more about different kinds of tips for preventing waste and not being stressed out when surprise expenses come about that you would have to use in an emergency. And then there are long-term ones, such as the retirement goals. You would have a car or a house eventually, and then for any loans that you get, like student loans or car loans. And then LearnMoney.org talks about this in their article titled Goals and Budgeting Decisions. So this one talks more about what kinds of goals people would set up, like the car or the house plan or loan, and describes that you would build interest and credit, as well as avoid wasting money and securing your loans and settling debts very early on. And then Debt.com talks about both times of terms, the short term and long term, in their article titled Personal Finances Statistics, which talks about things like there are 19% of people with an emergency budget and 31% with only $500 or less. So not even 31% of people have an emergency budget with $500 more in it. And they also talk about how there are 30% of people who even have a long-term budget to begin with. So now we've seen the short-term and long-term types of budgets. Now we have to talk about what not only you can gain, but what you can lose from it. This would be like preparing for an emergency, which Debt.com also pointed out with their 31% of people with $500 more in their emergency budget. If emergencies does come, people with $500 aren't going to be very well protected from that. So they have to really prepare for that. And then There's also wasteful spending, which the balance talks about with their uh, family income at stake on different things. So if you have family income, then everyone has to pitch into it when an emergency comes up. And they talk about this in their article, How Budgeting Can Improve Your Life, where they also talk about how paycheck to paycheck budgeting is often leads to surprise expenses that you'd have to take care of. And then Debt.com gives one more statistic of 28% of student loans have been defaulted, and 40 million Americans have a budget or have a debt that they need to budget for. So, yeah, with all that in mind, this shows how a budget would be very beneficial to have for not only yourself, but also for others, that you could tell your family and friends how to budget.